My name is Robert Caldwell. I spent 38 years as a civil engineer, and I built my entire life on one simple principle. Measure twice, cut once. I thought I knew how to read a situation before it fell apart. I was wrong. I was standing in my kitchen at 6:17 in the morning, the day after we buried my wife Carol, still wearing the same wrinkled dress shirt I had slept in on the couch because I could not bring myself to go upstairs and face the empty bed. The coffee was brewing, and the house smelled the way it always did in the morning, a little like cedar from the closet we'd never quite sealed, and a little like the lavender soap Carol kept in a dish by the sink. She had kept that dish full for 31 years. It was still full now. I was staring at it when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first. It was an office line, a downtown prefix. I almost let it go to voicemail because I was exhausted in a way that goes beyond sleep. The kind of exhaustion that sits behind your eyes and makes every small thing feel like a weight. But something made me answer. I don't know why. Maybe 38 years of professional instinct. When something seems wrong, you look at it before it gets worse. Robert? The voice was calm but measured, the way a man speaks when he is choosing his words carefully. This is Thad Whitmore. I was Carol's estate attorney. I knew the name. Carol had mentioned him a year ago when she updated her will. I had not paid much attention at the time. Carol handled the financial details of our life. She was sharper than me with documents and numbers, which was its own irony given that I designed load-bearing structures for a living. But she had a mind like a filing cabinet. She never lost a receipt, never forgot a deadline, never let anything slip through. Mr. Whitmore, I said, I was going to call you this week about the estate. I know, he said. That's actually why I'm calling you first. Robert, I need you to listen to me carefully. Do not attend any will reading or sign any document related to Carol's estate until you have spoken with me in person. Do not tell your daughter I called you. I set down my coffee mug. What are you saying? I'm saying that something came across my desk yesterday evening that concerns me deeply. I can't go into it on the phone. Can you come to my office today? Alone? I told him I could be there by 9. I want to tell you that I spent the 2 hours between that phone call and that meeting in a calm, rational state of mind. I want to tell you that I sat down, thought it through logically, and came to measured conclusions. But that would be a lie. I paced the length of my living room until I had practically worn a path in the carpet. I thought about Carol. I thought about her last few months, which had been difficult. She had been tired more than usual, short of breath, pale in a way that her doctor had attributed to anemia, and then to stress, and then, finally, to a heart that was simply wearing down. She was 64. Young for a heart attack. Her doctor had said so himself at the hospital, a fact that I had filed away somewhere in my grief and not looked at again. I thought about my daughter Claire, who was 36 years old, who had her mother's dark hair and her mother's way of tilting her head when she was listening, but who had something else entirely behind her eyes, a kind of calculation I had always told myself was just ambition. Her husband Derek was a real estate developer. They lived well, very well, and they always seemed to need more. But they were family. You do not look at family through a professional lens. You trust them. That is what family means. I told myself I was catastrophizing. I drove downtown. Thad Whitmore's office was on the 14th floor of a building Carol had always liked because of the way the windows caught the afternoon light. He was a tall man in his early 70s, with the kind of quiet authority that comes not from volume but from certainty. He shook my hand and sat me down and did not offer small talk. He opened a folder on his desk and turned it toward me. Carol came to me 8 months ago, he said. Not to update her will, Robert. She came to me to create a separate document, a sealed letter, and an accompanying file that she asked me to hold in my personal custody and deliver to you, and only to you, in the event of her death. I looked at the folder. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it in Carol's handwriting. She also gave me a flash drive, he said. He slid it across the desk. She said if anything ever happened to her, I was to make sure you saw this before anyone else told you anything about the estate. My hands were not steady when I picked up that envelope. I want to be honest about that. I am a 68-year-old man who spent his career being the steadiest person in the room, and my hands were shaking. The letter was 4 pages, front and back. in Carol's precise script. She had always written by hand when something mattered. I will not reproduce every word here. Some of it belongs only to me. But I will tell you what she told me, because it is the reason I am still standing today. Carol had discovered, 7 months before she died, that our daughter and her husband had been methodically draining a joint investment account that Carol managed, one I knew existed but rarely checked, because Carol handled it. Over the course of 2 years, through a series of transfers that Carol had initially believed were authorized and later realized were not, Derek had moved nearly $400,000 out of that account into a shell company he controlled. When Carol confronted our daughter about it, our daughter did not deny it. She told her mother it was a loan. She told her it would be paid back. She told her that if Carol involved the police or an attorney, she would tell everyone that Carol had been showing signs of dementia, that she had been confused and paranoid, that her memory was failing. Carol was not showing signs of dementia. She was sharp until the end. But she was 64 years old, and she knew how that story would sound if our daughter told it, and she was terrified. So she did not go to the police. Not immediately. Instead, she went to Thad Whitmore, and she began to document everything. Every transfer, every date, every conversation she could reconstruct. She had been building a case quietly, the same way she did everything methodically, carefully, without alarming anyone. And then her heart gave out before she finished. I sat in that chair for a long time after I finished reading. Thad did not rush me. He is a good man. When I finally looked up, I asked him what was on the flash drive. He said it contained screenshots of every unauthorized transfer, PDFs of bank statements Carol had downloaded and saved, and 3 audio recordings Carol had made on her phone during conversations with our daughter. In one of those recordings, our daughter said, and I am quoting directly from what Thad later played for me, "Mom, you are not well. Everyone can see it. If you push this, no one is going to believe you." I drove home in a state that I can only describe as being very, very cold. Not angry. Not yet. Cold. The way a structure feels before it fails, not dramatic, not loud. Just the quiet absence of everything that was holding it together. My daughter was already at the house when I got back. She had a key. She had always had a key, and Carol and I had always been glad of that. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, and she looked up when I came in with an expression of practiced grief that I had been reading as genuine for 3 days. Now I read it differently. "Dad," she said, "where have you been?" I was worried. "I went for a drive," I said. I needed air. She told me that Derek had spoken to someone about the estate process, and that there was some paperwork that needed to be filed relatively soon. She said it carefully, the way you might approach a nervous animal. And she touched my arm and said she just wanted to make everything easier for me, that she knew I was overwhelmed. I looked at my daughter's hand on my arm. I thought about 36 years. I thought about teaching her to ride a bike in the driveway of our first house. I thought about the night Carol and I sat in the hospital waiting room while our daughter was in surgery for a ruptured appendix, and Carol held my hand so hard she left marks on my palm. I said, "Of course, we'll get to all of that." And I smiled at her, and I meant nothing by it. That night, after she left, I called Thad back. We talked for an hour and a half. By the end of that call, I understood what Carol had been building toward, and I understood what I needed to do to finish it. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of my life, and I have had some hard stretches. I went through the motions of grief the way an actor goes through a performance present on the surface, entirely occupied underneath. I met with Thad twice more. I gave him access to our bank records. I sat with a forensic accountant named Patricia, a woman Thad trusted, who went through 14 months of transactions with the kind of thoroughness that made me feel, for the first time, that the ground was solid under my feet again. Patricia found $412,000. Not 400,000. 412. The extra 12 had come from a refinancing of a small rental property Carol and I owned jointly. A property I had not known was refinanced until Patricia showed me the documents. Derek had forged Carol's signature. He had forged mine. My daughter had let this happen. She had known. I want to stop here for a moment and say something clearly, because I think it matters. I never stopped loving my daughter during those 3 weeks. I want to be honest about that. You do not turn that off. You cannot. What I had to do was learn to hold two things at once: the love I had for the child I raised, and the clear-eyed recognition that what she had done was a crime, and that Carol had died carrying the weight of it alone, terrified and isolated, and that I owed it to my wife to see this through. Those two things lived in me at the same time, and they were both real, and I am not ashamed of either one. What I could not forgive, what I still cannot forgive, is that Carol died scared. That is the part that kept me moving when I wanted to stop. On a Tuesday morning in late October, my daughter called me and said that Derek had arranged for a meeting at their estate attorney's office, a different attorney, not Thad, to review what she called Carol's final arrangements regarding the property holdings. She said it casually, as if it were a routine administrative step. She said she thought it would help me feel more settled. I said I would be there. I told Thad. Thad made 2 phone calls. One to a detective he knew at the Financial Crimes Unit, one to the district attorney's office, where he had contacts from 30 years of estate work. He had already submitted Carol's documentation 2 weeks earlier. He told me the timing was, in his words, fortuitous. The meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning. I arrived at 9:55 and sat in the waiting room and read a magazine without seeing a single word on any page. My daughter arrived at 10:05 with Derek beside her. She hugged me. I let her. She smelled like the same perfume she had worn since college, a light floral scent that Carol had given her for her 21st birthday. I noticed that. We were shown into the conference room. There were documents laid out on the table. Derek was relaxed in the way that people are relaxed when they believe they have already won, leaning slightly back in his chair, his jacket perfectly pressed. My daughter sat beside him and reached over once to touch his hand. At 10:15, the door opened. 2 people walked in who were not from that office. A man and a woman, both in plain clothes, both with the particular kind of stillness that comes from doing a job you have done many times before. Behind them was a third person I recognized. The detective Thad had mentioned, a man named Hargrove, who had a manila folder under his arm and who looked at Derek the way an engineer looks at a structure he knows is going to fail. My daughter turned to me. I could not read her face in that moment. I do not know if it was disbelief or the beginning of understanding or something else entirely. She said, "Dad." I said, "I know, sweetheart." That is all I said. I do not think there were any words that would have improved on that. Derek was arrested first. He stood up, and his chair scraped back hard against the floor, and he said something to Hargrove that I will not repeat here, and then he was very quiet. My daughter did not stand up. She sat very still while they told her what the charges were, and I watched her face and I saw the moment when she understood that this was real, that it was not something she could manage or explain away or redirect. I left before they finished. Hargrove had told me I could go. He had what he needed. I drove to the cemetery. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something from a movie, but I genuinely did not plan it. I simply found myself driving there, and then found myself standing at Carol's grave, which still had fresh flowers on it from the service, slightly wilted now in the October cold. I stood there for a while. I told her what had happened. I told her I was sorry it had taken this long. I told her I was sorry she had carried it alone. The sky was overcast, the way it gets in late autumn in this part of the country, low and gray and still. A groundskeeper was working somewhere in the distance. A crow landed on a headstone about 20 feet away and looked at me with the specific, impersonal attention that birds give to everything, and then flew off again. I do not believe in signs. I am an engineer, but I stood there a little longer than I needed to, just in case. In the months that followed, I learned things about my own life that a man should never have to learn so late. The rental property was recovered. The investment account losses were partially recoverable through the legal process, not all of it, but enough. Thad was skilled and thorough, and Patricia's forensic work was meticulous in a way that left very little room for a defense to maneuver. Derek pled guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of forgery. He is serving time. My daughter took a plea as well. one count of fraud by concealment. She is not in prison, but she is not free either, not in the ways that matter. We have not spoken since that conference room. I think about calling her sometimes. I think about what I would say. I do not think there is a right conversation to have, not yet. Maybe there is one eventually. I genuinely do not know. What I do know is this. Carol knew something was wrong with her heart in those last months. She told me she was tired, and I told her to rest more. I told her to take her iron supplements and get more sleep. I did what you do when you love someone, and you are not ready to be afraid for them. I minimized it, because facing it felt too large. I wish I had faced it. I wish I had pushed harder, asked more questions, gone with her to more appointments. That is not guilt so much as it is the simple arithmetic of grief, the adding up of all the small choices that seemed reasonable at the time. But I also know that what Carol did in her last months, the quiet, methodical, careful documentation she left behind, the letter written in her precise hand, the flash drive sitting in Thad's custody, that was not the act of a woman who was failing. That was the act of someone who trusted that the truth would eventually be enough if it was assembled carefully. She was right. She was 31 years of being right about the things that mattered. I still have that letter. I have read it many times. Not the parts about the finances, those have served their purpose, and I do not need to revisit them. The part I keep returning to is the last paragraph. Carol wrote that she was sorry for not telling me sooner. She said she had been afraid I would confront our daughter directly, and that it would fall apart before the evidence was solid. She said she needed time to build something that would hold, and that she knew if anyone would understand the importance of building something that would hold, it was me. That is the part that undoes me every time. Not because it hurts, though it does, because she knew me well enough to explain it to me in exactly the language I would understand. After 31 years, she still knew exactly which words to use. I kept the lavender soap in the dish by the sink. I will keep it there as long as the smell lasts, and then I will buy more, because the house should smell like her for as long as I am living in it. The cedar closet I finally sealed. 31 years I meant to do it. Carol always said if I wanted it done, I should just do it myself, and she was right about that too. I go to the cemetery on Sundays. I do not always say anything. Some mornings I just stand there and watch the light come through the old oaks at the eastern edge of the grounds, and listen to whatever is present, the wind, the distant traffic, the particular silence of a place where people come to remember. It is enough. It is not everything, but it is enough. I am 68 years old and I am still here. And the woman I loved built me one last gift before she left, a careful, quiet structure, assembled with precision, designed to stand up under weight. It held. She knew it would. Measure twice, cut once. She always said I was the one who taught her that. I think we may have taught it to each other.